The chorus was in a consolation to the Hellene, thoughtful and uniquely susceptible as he was to the tenderest and deepest suffering, whose piercing gaze has seen to the core of the terrible destructions of world history and nature's cruelty, and who runs the risk of longing for a Buddha-like denial of the will. He is saved by art, and through art he has saved him for himself. I would say perhaps Nietzsche's misunderstanding Buddhism there, because yes, there's a denial of ego, but there's also, isn't there an acceptance, or at least in the New Age stuff, I admit it's not exactly completely the same as Buddhism, even if it's kind of doing the same thing. But there's this idea, okay, the will is like in the sacral yellow ray chakra, right? And that's the closest thing to ego anyway, if you look at the chakras. And you need to get to heart chakra and above, you need to have each chakra in balance below it and not closed off or too open, and it's been balanced. That would mean that, yeah, it's not like a deprivation or a lack of or constriction in where the will is, which would be the sacral chakra. You need it open and balanced, which means a good strong will to actually get to an open heart in the first place. But of course, Nietzsche wasn't coming from a society with an understanding of these things, like obviously not, and there was less exposure to Eastern Asiatic sort of religion for him anyway. Or at least he had enough exposure to know a bit about it. The ecstasy of the Dionysiac state, abolishing the habitual barriers and boundaries of existence, actually contains, for its duration, a lethargic element into which all past personal experience is plunged. Thus, through the gulf of oblivion, the worlds of everyday and Dionysiac reality become separated. But when one once more becomes aware of this everyday reality, it becomes repellent. This leads to the mood of aestheticism, a denial of the will. He does kind of have a point. He has a bias, but he has a point. And it's all well like doing all this ego death stuff and this denial of self, and that's not unhelpful. It's just if I consider Eckhart Tolle and his teachings, the idea of presence, it's not living in the clouds, denying the physical world. It's living present in the moment where you are, grounded in the physical and yet connected to the non-physical simultaneously, and just present. The presence is an infinite nothingness, which is the observer we are, not the full self of the ego, but the observer that it experiences everything. We experience the sensory information, but we experience from this observation point that is beyond the sensory and the physical, and yet fundamentally experiences these things from a vantage point. We are not a physical body, but it's like our spirit body and our energy body is fundamentally aligned in its position with that while we are living our lives. And we observe and experience what the body experiences, so to speak, but we are the experiencer, the viewer, the observer, and we are infinite source. But that does not mean we cut ourselves off from the the everyday physical reality. What it means is we bring presence and the divine into our everyday reality. It's actually the opposite. Although Nietzsche's talking about what happens if it goes awry and you just pull out completely for interaction with it. And that's actually not really true spirituality. It's almost like a spiritual ego thing to do that. Now, Nietzsche's right that it would be detrimental to completely cut off from the physical and just purely go spiritual, because like there's a unity to all things and the unity to the spiritual, and there's no unity in a dualistic split where you just pick one half of reality. Like, I think you see my point. Thus, through this gulf of oblivion, the worlds of the everyday and the Dionysiac reality become separated, like I was saying, right? This is something that Dionysiac man shares with Hamlet. Both have truly seen to the essence of things. They have understood, and action repels them, for their action can change nothing in the eternal essence of things. They consider it ludicrous or shameful that they would have to be expected to restore order to the chaotic world. Understanding kills action. Information depends on the veil of illusion. This is what Hamlet teaches us, not to the stock interpretation of Hamlet as a John of Dreams who, from too much reflection, from an excess of possibilities, so to speak, fails to act. Although, as we know, as we've come across so far reading this, Nietzsche talks about unifying the Apolline and the Dionysiac, right? So he doesn't say, okay, the Dionysiac is bullshit, fuck the Dionysiac. Let's just have a supremacy of the will and the physical, always acting, always going, go, 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 go. Let's have a supremacy of the will and like fuck the spiritual and fuck anything more than that. Like, honestly, words are power, so I feel comfortable even having said that. But he doesn't, I don't think he would mean that. Because he's talking about, he's not saying just pick one side of the duality. He's not saying go with the physical. In fact, he was very clear that going too real and grounded, but without the non-physical, and without the non-real, if you just focus on what's real, and you're actually missing part of the picture. But now he's saying you don't want to just focus on the ethereal, ungrounded spiritual and deny the real. So he's actually making it very clear. First, don't deny the non-real, so to speak, or the fictional, or the symbolic. Don't deny that. It's important. Secondly, he's saying don't deny the physical. Right? Don't go airy-fairy denying that you're grounded in an actual physical reality. Like, you're here for a reason, right? Don't deny your own will, but he's saying these things simultaneously. So he's not contradicting himself. He's suggesting here is an integration of these two things, which aligns very much with this idea of aligning with the Dionysiac and the Apolline.